Welcome to World Chef's podcast. I'm your host, Ragnar, and you're listening to World on a Plate. We have talked much about the vegan trend and veganism. I'm sure you've noticed. And this is a very important topic for our industry to understand in order to meet changing consumer demand. But does it mean we ban meat from the menu? Now, not everyone sees themselves in the veganism trend. And, some of you even feel you're being pushed. It's being pushed upon you. So take, for example, we had violent attacks on butcher shops that have taken place in Europe. This is condemnable. So our role in World Chefs is not to impose views and tell you what to think, but really to educate and inform you in the most objective way that we can. So I have with me Thomas Heinen, who is he's a fourth generation tanner, a leather manufacturer. And together, we're going to talk about the global picture. When we discuss about animal husbandry, it's more than just the meat on your plate. So welcome on the show, Thomas.
Thank you, Ragnar. Very nice to be here with you.
Yeah, it's very good to have you because we need that sort of outside look to understand better. And as you mentioned, as I mentioned, you're not exactly a player in the hospitality industry. But maybe you can start by telling us, your history, the history of your family company, and what is it that you do?
Okay. Our family business is making leather. My great-grandfather started in 1891 producing leather here in the Lower Rhine area in Germany near Düsseldorf. We are located where basically the Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany get together. From day one on, my great-grandfather started producing leather for shoes. Over the generation, many things happened in the industry. There have been some very good times and some very difficult times, but we're still there, still making leather for shoes. Today, our main business is to produce technical shoe upper leather. That means if you buy some kind of footwear with a technical expectation. So if you go into the mountains, if you go in the Alpine region, go hiking, you expect your boot to be very supportive for your foot. It needs to be waterproof. It needs to be very durable. So these kind of leathers we are producing. So outdoor is a very important market for us, but also government business, military, police, firefighters, special forces, Air Force, border control. So there's many different groups that require some kind of technical footwear for their jobs. Besides outdoor and government, we are doing also some streetwear and fashion business. But being German, we are not known to do fashion. We leave that for the Italians and the French and the Spanish. So let's say we do streetwear and not so much fashion. Our products are more technical than fashion, but even if you wear a regular sandal in summertime and there's a summer rain, you don't want the leather to soak up water. So there we are again with our technical leathers, even on the fashion business. So that's pretty much what we're doing.
I think now we all understand that you do have an interest in the subject. Meat and leather, well, they come from the same animal, don't they? And so we're not hiding the fact that you're coming from a particular point of view, and so listeners are aware of that. And that we all understand that this whole debate about against animal husbandry and cattle and meat consumption, that you are actually also very much affected by that debate. So it is relevant for you. Now, so can I ask you? So when you hear radical speeches about stop eating meat entirely, what does that inspire you? How does that? No, more vegans, less leather.
I'm just like you said in your intro, I'm not somebody who tells people what they have to eat and not to eat. But what I encourage people to do is to think on the overall impact, what is happening. So if you take us as a tannery, we take a byproduct of the meat and milk food industry. If people eat less meat, drink less milk and less cheese, whatever, there will be less farmers out there. So of course, then I have less raw material available. But already today, there's more rawhides available on the market than people use leather. So you have several million hides every year that is being just dumped. It's not being used for leather. So there is an abundance of hides available, not in every quality, but overall, there's enough hides there. If people eat less meat, you will have a negative impact on farming. So if we have less farms, in the end, you will have less people taking care of countryside. Go back to the Alpine region. In the Alpine region, you have a lot of farms with cows. And when we go hiking in this region, that's actually where we stop for a beer and for lunch and dinner. That's probably where a lot of your listeners also work in this region. So we all live off tourism as well. So less meat means less farms, means less people going to these places for hiking, means for me lesser hides available. People will not buy maybe hiking boots anymore. So everything is very much connected. It's not just about do we eat meat or do we not eat meat. It's about how do we want our countryside to look? Who is taking care of this, again, Alpine region or many other regions in Europe? What kind of footwear are we wearing later on? Are we all wearing plastic shoes, like most of the sneakers nowadays are? Do we wear them for 6 months to a year and throw them away? Or do we buy a high-end product that lasts longer for 5 years or even 15 years, if it's well done? So it's not just about, do I put the real milk in my cappuccino or do I take some kind of replacement in the cappuccino? It's a bigger picture. And that's what most consumers and even some people in the industry are not really aware of.
And I mean, as you said, I mean, the animal husbandry, from hunting to husbandry has, it has millions of years of traditions in human history. And so, as you said, it's connected to our daily lives in so many ways. And you mentioned, the shoes being replaced by a plastic. Could we say that that in the end we reach a higher CO2 emissions when we substitute natural products with chemical products? So whether that's the way we want to go.
Well, it goes like this. You're looking at a life cycle assessment. So from the beginning to the end of the product. So if you don't take the animal in for the first step, you just take the production of a leather and a plastic. Leather production releases more CO2 than a plastic production. Then you go into the shoe production. Also, the shoe production with leather releases more CO2 than a much quicker and easier production of a plastic shoe. Then we're in the usage. The usage, a high-end leather boot is at least 10 times as high as a well-made plastic shoe. So, and that's where the whole thing tips over. So if you just look at the production, leather is not as good as plastic, but if you include the usage, then leather is so much better. And that's when the CO2 impact is going really down. Now, if you add the animal into it, the question is how much of that CO2 backpack that is released through an animal has to be carried by the leather. So some has to be carried by meat, some has to be carried by milk, some has to be certainly in the byproducts, which also is the skin. So, and that is more a political question, how much CO2 needs the leather to carry. But if you look at the usage of a high-end product, a high-end leather product is so much longer. And all of the listeners know when they have a nice leather bag, it lasts for a very long time. If you take a plastic bag, you pretty much throw it away after you are tired of looking at it. And that repeats with all the high-end leather products. And if you go really extreme into the Hermes and Vuitton bags, they're handed down through generations compared to some mediocre synthetic bag. Not mentioning that the plastic particles in the end, as we know, all end up in our oceans. So with leather, you don't have that.
That's right. Hey, but you also mentioned something interesting. I found interesting. It's the cultural part of animal husbandry, and the one you mentioned. You want to visit the countryside, and you want to stop for a meal, and you want to, so all that nature is taken care of by the farmers. Can we imagine, like, can we replace that land by growing corn and make bread? Or I don't know. And can we just change that farmland from cattle farming, and should we all be just like then focusing on making vegan ingredients, whatever that could be, from nuts to corn to apples, what have you?
Well, for one thing, you have a certain cultural heritage. So in certain regions, grow for cultural reasons, certain things that the people eat in that region. Of course, eating habits can be adjusted, but then you also need to look at the climate, what grows in certain regions. And that is very much related to the culture. So people traditionally grew in their region what was possibly to grow there.
Part of history.
Yeah. So of course, certain things can be redone. You can also grow certain crops that in the end goes into biogas, and you create energy with that. All of that would change the look of our countryside. And I'm not sure if that is really what we want. And maybe I'm conservative in that way, but I think the beauty in the countries is that they are all different and they have their heritage, and they do in the local area what they do best. And that also is true for food, and the food very much relates to farming and whoever creates the ingredients for the food in the end we eat. And it's beautiful that it's different in France and in Italy or in Greece or in Germany or in Scandinavia. Everywhere it's a little bit different, again, based on culture, based on climate. And that's where the differences come in. So now of course, we can go and say, okay, we're all going to do corn and we're going to do bioenergy there. For me, that would be a shame and not the right way to go.
So very important to keep that biodiversity and that balance in our approach. I mean, we talk a lot about the environmental impact of cattle growing, for instance. The gas emissions, CO2 emissions, killing forests for breeding more cattle. I mean, do you see a problem with over-exploiting the earth with cattle farming?
Yeah, absolutely. There has been a lot of damage done by cattle farming, mainly in South America, not only, but mainly in South America. And there have been some very good initiatives by Greenpeace, for example. Some years back, they very much looked into that to stop burning down the Amazon. So it's important that globally the whole industry goes against that politically, and industry leaders. A lot of tanneries are organized in a group called Leather Working Group. They're based out of England. And part of the Leather Working Group protocol is that the tanneries need to prove that they don't buy their hides from the Amazon region. And if you're a good brand, you request your tannery, your supplier, to be part of the Leather Working Group. So the industry has done a tremendous effort to eliminate those hides. And the big automotive companies, they put a lot of effort in that all of these hides don't end up in some Audi or BMW anymore. And some years back they did. And but all of that has changed. The industry has certainly done some damage some years and decades back. Some of the things were done unknowingly, some things were probably done knowingly, but in the end, a lot of the bad players went out of business because they simply don't find customers anymore. And the ones remain, they need to show different certifications, like the one from the Leather Working Group or Oecotex, or different environmental labels that prove that they are very careful where they source their hides from.
Right. So you do agree that, yeah, we need to be more responsible and not just do whatever for more profits and more money. We need to so banning on one side is not the solution because of the impact, but we need to be more responsible in the way moving forward. So maybe with more focus on health and quality and environmental protection.
Absolutely. I think, you know, when you look at Central Europe, the development during the war and after the war, people had basically no money, and they never ate meat because they simply didn't have money. Then after the war, there was a little bit more money available, and like my grandmother, on Sunday, there was a big piece of meat in the oven. So that was once a week. And then, of course, income developed, and people started to eat meat pretty much 7 days a week, 3 times a day. And of course, that is also not good. It's not good for our health, probably, and it's also probably not good for the environment, because you require a lot of animals and a lot of massive intensive farming, which is also not good. So I think the pendulum now swings back a little bit, and of course, the vegan trend is the extreme in that. But a lot of people are more flexitarians. They say, okay, I still eat meat, but I don't eat it 7 days a week, 3 times a day. I eat it maybe 2, 3, 4 times a week in one meal. And now comes the big difference. I watch out carefully where this meat is coming from. Maybe I spend a little bit more money for it. And I'm aware where the animal is coming from and how what was fed to the animal. And maybe it's a butcher in the village where you buy your meat then, and you trust that person. And it's the same for the byproducts that are generated when doing this, let's call it more careful consumption. You want to know who made your shoe, where's the shoe made. You don't want it to be made in some sweatshop in Bangladesh. You want to know the brand. You want to know that it's made in a particular place with good materials. And it's all going through the supply chain at the moment. And the chefs listening to this, they probably can relate to that in their restaurants, that they put on their menu that this piece of meat comes from this region, somewhere from a special farmer, whatever, so a special story. And we do the same in the leather. So we try to put transparency into our product to explain the consumer to consume more carefully. Because in the end, the best for our planet would be that we all wouldn't exist. But since we're already existing, we need to be careful what we consume. And again, the best thing would be if we don't consume, but again, that's not possible. So we need to consume more carefully. And when you are more careful, you're looking at a higher quality. You want things to last longer. You want things to be better. And then in the end, that's a much lower impact to our environment.
Yeah, to consume more responsibly, and educating ourselves is really a big part of that, isn't it? And this is, you know, why we are here talking about the issue. I was actually quite amazed. I mean, we have one of our partners is husbandry, agro group that is biggest producer of veal in the world, and you know, some people would have come up to me and say, hey, veal, you know, it's the most unsustainable meat, you know, they are not even grown animals, they haven't lived a full life, etc. What I wasn't aware of is that, and you might be, because I think you buy veal, it makes a nice leather. It's a byproduct from the milk industry, right?
Yes, it is. Of course, veal or calf leather in our industry, calf leather is the highest quality type of leather you can get for certain applications. Yeah, it's a byproduct of the milk industry. So the calves are there. It goes back to the question. It's a little bit an ethical question. We do kill animals as humans, and of course for us it seems more brutal if you kill a younger animal. But in the end, it goes back to the question: are we allowed as humans to use animals? And I think we can, because and I don't feel so bad about it, because I think again it's in our evolution that there's somebody in the food chain that eats the one below. And I don't think the lion is a bad lion if that lion kills some animal in the jungle. I don't think that's a bad lion. And I don't think we are bad people if we kill an animal because we eat the animal. For me, the big difference is, in the end, is the consumer. So the farmer takes very much good care of the animals, also for money reasons, because that's his income. The slaughterhouse will be very, very careful with the animal and how they do it. One, of course, for legal reasons, but second, also, again, for the money, because that's how they make their money. They by taking an animal apart and sell all the parts, and that's their income. And the restaurants will be very careful how they buy the meat and what they do. They will be very careful because, again, they earn the money. Tanners, very careful with the skin and so on. So where's the problem in the whole chain? The consumer is the problem, because we all have been to barbecues. There is never a barbecue where everything is eaten. That's where the waste starts. So from the beginning on to the end, there is no waste except for the consumer. The consumer is relatively wasteful, and there's many statistics about it. How much food is rotten in our fridges and is not being used, or at the barbecue, and that's the real problem for me. I don't see that there is a problem of slaughtering the right way and using everything from the animal. I think that's totally okay, but then don't waste it. I think waste is disrespectful, because in the end, the animal died. And just like in nature, once the lion killed the gnu or whatever, the whole animal is being eaten. It's all being used, down to the little ants that eat the leftovers. So in nature, everything is used, but humans, we are wasteful.
That's right. That's right. And, some people ask, how are we gonna, if everybody wants to eat meat, and how are we gonna feed 7 billion people on the planet? But actually, others would argue that if we used better the resources that we have, there is plenty for everyone.
Absolutely.
It's fruit, meat, or others. And then
yeah.
And back to the choices we have. We mentioned the veals are a byproduct, and just to explain that, a milking cow needs to have a veal, right? And only so many will become female and make milk again. Others will be male, and so there is a choice. What happens to these young male? It would not be sustainable to grow them to a full body animal. But yeah, they have this the destiny, whether it's ethical or not. Can we put it as an animal? So far, we've been doing for millions of years. It's part of nature for some. Others don't agree. But yeah, that's the way it is. So the veal becomes our food, our ingredient for your leather, for so many other things. That is absolutely everything is used on that animal, and I've witnessed that. It goes into cosmetics, goes into the leather industry, goes into medical industry. It goes into everything is used. So that's a very important point, isn't it?
And everything goes back to the eating habits in certain countries. Like in Germany, there's not so many veal calf being slaughtered because Germans simply don't eat so much calf. But in France, for example, and in the Netherlands, there's a lot of calf. And then if you again go down the whole supply chain, in France, because the eating habit was towards calf, there is a calf skin. So based on that calf skin being available, there is calf skin tanneries there. In Germany, there's basically no calf skin tannery. So from the calf's leather, certain bag companies were developed over the centuries. Right. So in the end, you have a Louis Vuitton and an Hermes. It's no coincidence that these brands are high-end using calf leather. So it's all connected, from eating habits back to the purse that the ladies wear on Champs-Élysées.
Exactly. Everything is connected. And I think that's the message here today. Not that we're saying that we shouldn't embrace vegetables because they are great food and healthy for us, but that we should also look at the greater picture when we become too dogmatized and too radical. That it actually everything is related, and keeping a good balance. And as you said, knowing where your produce come from and being educated and informed of the way they were produced, and not be wasteful. Keep that quality all through the value chain. We can have a harmonious menu and happy customers.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think everybody needs to be a little bit more aware that things are connected and it has an impact. And we don't need to go extreme of eating only meat or no meat. I think there is a healthy middle point, together with other ingredients that make a great dish. And in the end, it's about balance very much in life. And it goes back to the menu and all the other products that come with it.
Well, Thomas, thank you for that. Thank you for that insight. It's been great talking to you. And I think for our listeners also appreciative. We are not here to tell people what to think, but that the options they have are there, and I think that's the most important. So I want to thank you for for sharing your experience and your points of view with that.
Thank you, Ragnar, for having me.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. You're listening to World Chef Podcast. This is World on a Plate, and I'm your host, Ragnar. We'll be back next week with a new episode. So thank you and stay safe. Bye-bye.